Officer Daniel Pitta, along with fellow officer William Warner, were the first police officers at the crime scene. Then Sergeant Pierre Baudou and Lieutenant George Little arrived at the scene. But this was the jurisdiction of the county. So Deputy Russell Butterbach and Wayne Waterman arrived next. And then finally the sheriff arrived. This video begins a cold case investigation into the Zodiac murders. So first we'll look at this crime scene at Lake Herman Road. Then we will move on to the Blue Rock Springs crime scene. So first, a brief recap of the crime scene. So at 11 o'clock, Betty and Homer Yore drove by and saw David and Betty in the station wagon. And then the raccoon hunters drove by and saw the station wagon at 11:05. And then at 11:10, James Owen drove by and saw two cars at the turnout. Then the Zodiac struck and shot David and Betty. And then shortly after that, Stella saw Betty and David lying in the dirt. And she raced off to notify the police in Benicia. Information that we know about Betty Lou Jensen, age 16. First, the death certificate. She died from multiple gunshot wounds to the chest and abdomen. Victim shot 5 times in the back. Betty had no police record. She was a native of Colorado. She was a junior and honors student at Hogan High School. She was a Grand Royal Bride of the Primavera Council, number 132, at the Pyrithian Sunshine Girls. She is a member of the Christian Science Church. Her father, Vernon Jensen, age 49, was a retired military veteran. And so here's a look at his registration card for World War II. And you can see that at the time of Betty's murder, he was a computer programmer for the General Services Administration. And then Betty's mother, Virginia Jensen, age 44, was a substitute teacher for the Vallejo School District. David Faraday, age 17. So his certificate of death shows that he died from a bullet wound through the head and brain with hemorrhage. Victim was shot in the head. David Faraday had no police record. He was a native of San Rafael, California, a Vallejo resident for 3.5 years. He was a senior at Vallejo High School, where he was active in school government. He was a member of the wrestling team. He was an Eagle Scout, member of Explorer Post 209. He had a Timex wristwatch, chrome case, and band on his left wrist, 85 cents, 3 quarters and 1 dime in his left front pants pocket, a black comb in his left hip pocket, a white handkerchief, and small bottle of breath drops, Bianca, in his right front pants pocket. His mother had said that she had given him $1.55, all in change, quarters, and dimes. David's father was Thomas Faraday, age 42, and he was a veteran of the military. And here's his registration card from World War II. And you can see that he's from the San Francisco area, and his mother worked at Pan American Airlines at Treasure Island. In this telephone directory, you can see that he worked at PG&E, Pacific Gas and Electric. David's mother, Jean Faraday, age 42, was a punch card operator at Travis Air Force Base. This newspaper article states that the teenagers were out on a first date and may have been murdered by a jealous suitor of Miss Jensen's. Now, the police found in Betty's paperwork, in her notebooks or somewhere, this note that she wrote. Do you know a kid named Richard Burton? I was going with him until 2 days before the installation. He still phones me and is threatening me to keep away from Dave. He said if he's ever close enough to Dave, he would punch him one in the teeth. I told him to leave me alone if he knows what's good for him. So the person that Betty was worried about was Ricky Allen Burton, born on January 5th, 1953, making him 15 years old at the time that she was murdered. And he was a fellow student at Hogan High School. And he lived at 202 Baywood Drive, which is located just north of Betty's house, as you can see in this map here. And you can see north of that is Hogan High School, and then to the left is where Brian Mayhew lived, and to the east is where Sharon Henson lived. And here's a report about Ricky Burton. And you can see they have the wrong age. He was age 15. You see this in many reports. And it has the wrong spelling of his middle name. And in this statement, they advised Ricky of his constitutional rights to remain silent. But he wanted to help the police. And so he said he was over Debbie's house in the afternoon, and then in the evening he watched a movie with his family. Now, one interesting thing is that Debbie lived right across the street from William Crow, the man who was out there in his girlfriend's sports car at 10 o'clock. So maybe there's something there. Now, the police reports are mainly about Betty and her friends. And most of her friends were involved in this Sunshine Girls. And so Betty is right there. And Diane, Betty's other good best friend, is right here. Now, the police also talked with Diane Anderson, who lived at 766 Lockwood Street. And she also provided the police with another name, Robert Dillon. And she said to talk to Alice Doherty, who lived at 1481 Delwood Avenue. Now, there's a good chance that the Zodiac Killer knew nothing about Betty Lou Jensen or David Faraday. He just randomly decided to murder them for some unknown reason when they were parked on the side of the road at that turnout. So there's 3 more things that I wanted to point out in this video. First, the reason that I'm going over all these details about where the father or mother worked and stuff like that is in case in a future video we might see a connection and be able to find the Zodiac Killer. Second, there was this little piece of information in one of the police reports that I thought was interesting. And last, I wanted to mention the person that I suspect might have killed David and Betty. So that interesting detail in the police reports was this, that Mrs. Yore was talking to, I guess, a customer at a fast food restaurant in Benicia. And that person, a juvenile, stated that she saw some men in a car racing towards Benicia at 90 miles an hour. And I guess they never followed up on this. But this seems to show that the Zodiac Killer drove through Benicia and maybe headed west on that highway that heads back to Vallejo in the south area there. My theory is that there might have been a 3rd raccoon hunter out that night, Harlan Hall, because he was a neighbor of Robert Kennelly's, and Robert Kennelly suggested the police go see him about a gun being at his house. Ralph Harlan Hall worked at the Red Top Dairy in Fairfield, up the Highway 21. The way that Robert Kennelly said that he went home to Napa the night of the murders. So here's a map of that area, and then the little advertisement for Red Top Dairy, and it was up at the top right-hand corner off of the map, northeast. Well, this ends this episode of Unsolved, and next week, next Saturday, for the Zodiac Killer case, I'm going to present several new names from the police reports and photographs of individuals that haven't been disclosed as far as I know. So I'll see you then.